What's going on, everyone? Charlie here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at Chapter 2 of Secrets of the Federal Reserve System, the Aldrich Plan. Let's go ahead and take a look. So, quick recap. First time around, we discussed the Jekyll Island venture from all of the big bankers. So, at the time, back then, they later became known as J.P. Morgan. Or actually, J.P. Morgan was the only one with the same name back then. But others like Lehman Brothers and Bank of America had different names at the time, and I'll make sure that I link that video below if you haven't seen it. So basically, so far, the most powerful and rich men in the world went on a mission to Jekyll Island in 1910 to forge the Federal Reserve Act, which would give them everything they'd ever wanted: the control of the money supply or the control of humanity. They had been trying for quite some time to enact the Federal Reserve system or a central bank on the American people, but it was met with resistance, and a lot of it. So this was drafted, of course, in secrecy and headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich. They only had one shot to get this drafted correctly, as the scope of their journey would likely not be able to be completed again. So now we're looking at the return from Jekyll Island back to New York and what happened. It's a statue. Chapter 2. The participants of the Jekyll Island Conference returned to New York to direct a nationwide propaganda campaign in favor of the Aldrich Plan. 3 of the leading universities, Princeton, Harvard, and the University of Chicago, were used as the rallying points for this propaganda, and national banks had to contribute to a fund of $5 million, which granted back then was a shit ton of money, to persuade the American public that the central bank plan should be enacted into law by Congress. Now, Woodrow Wilson, governor of New Jersey and former president of Princeton University, was enlisted as a spokesman for the Aldrich Plan. During the Panic of 1907, Wilson had declared all this trouble could be averted if we appointed a committee of 6 or 7 public-spirited men like J.P. Morgan to handle the affairs of our country. Yeah, thanks a lot, Woodrow Wilson, you dumbass. That was a horrible, horrible idea. He must have been sucking him off. Anyways, from the mouth of the snake. In his biography of Nelson Aldrich in 1930, Stevenson says, a pamphlet was issued January 16, 1911, the suggested plan for monetary legislation by Hon Nelson Aldrich, based on Jekyll Island conclusions. Stevenson says on page 388, an organization for financial progress has been formed. Mr. Warburg introduced a resolution authorizing the establishment of the Citizens League, later in the National Citizens League, or which later became the National Citizens League. Professor Laughlin of the University of Chicago was given charge of the League's propaganda. It is notable that Stevenson characterizes the work of National Citizens League as propaganda, while Seligman described Warburg's work as the education for the country and to break down prejudices. Yeah, okay. Also in the biography of Nelson Aldrich, Stevenson reveals that the Citizens League was also a Jekyll Island product. In Chapter 4 of the book, the Aldrich Plan was represented to Congress as the result of 3 years of work, study, and travel by members of the National Monetary Commission, with expenditures of more than $300,000. Now, if you remember, the National Monetary Commission was headed by Nelson Aldrich, who was heading this Jekyll Island fanboy club, or this Jekyll Island circle jerk club. So basically, they had the National Monetary Commission head order this be done. So none of it makes sense, really. But back then, I guess there was far less resources to find bullshit than we have today. So much of the $5 million of the bankers' slush fund was spent under the auspices of the National Citizens League, which was made up of college professors, as we just mentioned. The 2 most tireless propagandists for the Aldrich Plan were the Professor O.M. Sprague of Harvard and J. Lawrence Laughlin of the University of Chicago. Now, this is an interesting speech by Lindbergh. You may have heard this, but this is what this is relating to, if you didn't know, but now you do. Lindbergh's speech before Congress. Our financial system is a false one and a huge burden on the people. I have alleged that there is a money trust. The Aldrich Plan is a scheme plainly in the interest of the trust. Why does the money trust press so hard for the Aldrich Plan now, before the people know what the money trust has been doing? The Aldrich Plan is the Wall Street Plan. It is a broad challenge to the government by the champion of the money trust. It means another panic, if necessary, to intimidate the people. Aldrich, paid by the government. God, every time I hear that name, I think of Dark Souls. Aldrich, paid by the government to represent the people, proposes a plan for the trusts instead. It was by a very clever move that the National Monetary Commission was created. In 1907, nature responded most beautifully and gave this country the most bountiful crop it had ever had. Other industries were busy too, and from a natural standpoint, all the conditions were right for a most prosperous year. Instead, a panic entailed enormous losses upon us. Wall Street knew that the American people were demanding a remedy against the recurrence of such a ridiculously unnatural condition. Most senators and representatives fell into the Wall Street trap and passed the Aldrich Vreeland Emergency Currency Bill. But the real purposes was to get a monetary commission which would frame a proposition for amendments to our currency and banking laws which would suit the money trust. The interests are now busy everywhere educating the people in favor of the Aldrich Plan. It is reported that a large sum of money has been raised for this purpose. Wall Street speculation brought on the Panic of 1907, as did many of the other panics we're going to see in this series. The depositors' funds were loaned to gamblers. Sounds like today. And anybody the money trust wanted to favor. Then, when the depositors wanted their money, the banks did not have it. That made the panic. So we did get some resistance from Carter Glass. So to promote the Democratic Currency Bill, Carter Glass made public the sorry record of the Republican efforts of Senator Aldrich's National Monetary Commission. His House report in 1913 said Senator McVeigh fixes the cost of the National Monetary Commission to May 12, 1911 at $207,130. Again, a lot of money back then. They have since spent another $100,000 of the taxpayers' money. The work done at such cost cannot be ignored, but having examined the extensive literature published by the Commission, the Banking and Currency Committee finds that little bears upon the present state of the credit market of the United States. We object to the Aldrich Bill on the following points. Its entire lack of adequate government or public control of the banking mechanism it sets up. Its tendency to throw voting control into the hands of the large banks of the system. The extreme danger of inflation of currency inherent in the system. The insincerity of the bond funding plan provided for by the measure. There being a barefaced pretense that this system was to cost the government nothing. The dangerous monopolistic aspects of the bill. Our committee finds that the outset of its work was met by a well-defined sentiment in favor of a central bank, which was the manifest outgrowth of the work that had been done by the National Monetary Commission. So these 5 points seems familiar, right? Extreme danger of inflation of currency inherent in the system, its tendency to throw voting control into the hands of the large banks, its entire lack of adequate government or public control in the banking mechanism it sets up. These are the changes we're seeing now, 108 years later. Unbelievable. So Glass's denunciation of the Aldrich Bill as a central bank plan ignored the fact that his own Federal Reserve Act would fulfill all the functions of a central bank. Its stock would be owned by a private stockholder who could use the credit of the government for their own profit. It would have control of the nation's money and credit resources, and it would have bank of issue, which would finance the government by mobilizing credit in times of war. In The Rationale of Central Banking, Vera C. Smith, Committee for Monetary Research and Education, June 1981, writes, the primary definition of a central bank is a banking system in which a single bank has either a complete or residuary monopoly in the note issue. A central bank is not a natural product of banking development. It is imposed from outside or comes into being as the result of government favors, which is exactly what that was. Therefore, a central bank attains its commanding position from its government-granted monopoly of the note issue. This is the key to its power. Also, the act of establishing a central bank has a direct inflationary impact because of the fractional reserve system, which allows the creation of book entry loans and thereby money, a number of times the actual money which the bank has in its deposits or reserves. We're blowing this all up right now in today's life. That's what we're doing. So Glass, to reiterate, he objected on these points here. But then his own Federal Reserve Act that we're about to take a look at next basically set up the same thing. Gotcha! The Aldrich Plan never came to a vote in Congress because the Republicans lost control of the House in 1910 and subsequently lost the Senate and the presidency in 1912. Next, we're going to take a look at that dirty old Federal Reserve Act. It's going to be sticky icky. See y'all later.